Welcome to the Deep Dive, where I uploaded my transcript for the podcast and have two AI hosts talk about it. They may go into more depth than I went into. So without further ado, here's the Deep Dive.
Right. Strap in, everyone, because today we're taking a deep dive.
Yeah.
Going into the kind of shady world of manipulation tactics.
Oh, that would be good.
It's going to be how they work.
Yeah.
And the why. You know, like why some personality types are drawn to them.
Right.
It's like your toolkit for recognizing those red flags.
Absolutely.
And, keeping yourself safe.
Yeah.
Our source for this deep dive, it's an audio excerpt.
Okay.
It's actually called S02E22 Manipulation Tactics, The Why of Things.
All right.
Trust me, dense stuff.
Yeah, I bet.
But we're gonna break it down to the good parts for you.
Perfect.
So you can use this knowledge.
It's almost like learning a secret language.
It is.
Once you understand these tactics, you start to see them everywhere.
Oh yeah.
And while we're focusing, on how these tactics are used by those with cluster B personality disorders,
right.
Remember, we're not trying to diagnose anyone.
Right.
This is about recognizing patterns. Understanding what might be motivating those patterns.
Exactly. It's like a decoder ring.
Right.
For human behavior. It can help you understand why someone might be acting the way they're acting.
Right.
But also how to protect yourself from being manipulated.
And the fascinating thing is that a lot of times those with these disorders, they aren't fully aware of the impact of their actions.
Right.
So it's not always about some malicious intent. Sometimes it's just like a defense mechanism.
Right.
A way of coping with insecurities, with emotional turmoil.
So let's unpack some of these tactics.
Yeah.
First one on the list, gaslighting.
Okay.
This one always gives me the chills because it's so insidious.
Right.
That classic scenario where someone tries to make you doubt your own reality.
Right. It's truly twisting perceptions, Imagine someone denying things that happened. It happened, but they're saying it didn't. Twisting your words, just flat out lying to your face. And they will do anything to make you question your memory, your sanity, even just your grip on reality.
Wow.
And what's so fascinating is how this tactic can be used by different personality types.
Yeah.
For different reasons. Take someone with Impulsive Disregard Disorder, for example, ID.
Right.
They might gaslight to avoid getting caught in a lie, to maintain control over a situation.
Okay.
Like reacting impulsively, protecting those immediate needs. But then you have someone with extreme self-focus disorder, ESFD.
Right.
And their motivations are completely different.
So someone with ESFD, they might use gaslighting to protect their image.
Exactly.
Their ego.
Yeah.
To them, admitting a fault, even a small one, it's like shattering a mirror.
Right. It's just not an option.
Yeah.
And then you have emotional intensity disorder, EID. And this is where things get really interesting because their gaslighting might not even be intentional.
Wow.
Their perception of reality can be so fluid, so driven by their intense emotions that they genuinely believe their distorted version of events. It's not necessarily malicious, but it can be incredibly damaging.
Wow.
And finally, we have the dramatic attention seeking disorder, DASD. For them, it's about being the star of the show. They'll twist and exaggerate events to create drama and make themselves the center of attention.
It's like their reality is a stage and they're always playing the lead role.
Exactly.
But what's interesting is how all these different personality types with their different motivations, they can use this same tactic.
Yeah.
Gaslighting.
Exactly.
To manipulate, to control.
It really highlights that common thread of control that runs through a lot of these manipulation tactics.
So speaking of control, let's move on to another tactic closely related to gaslighting.
Yeah.
Isolation.
Yeah, isolation.
Yeah.
This one's all about cutting you off from your support system, your friends, your family.
Right.
Anyone who might offer a different perspective.
It's classic divide and conquer.
Absolutely.
And it's a tactic often employed by someone with, say, ID.
Right.
To prevent their behavior from being exposed.
Absolutely. They eliminate any potential threat to their power by isolating their target.
Right.
But for someone with ESFD,
right.
isolation serves a different purpose.
Okay.
They're not just trying to hide their behavior. They're trying to ensure that they remain the primary source of validation for their target.
So it's not just control.
Right.
It's possessiveness.
Yeah, absolutely.
They want to own your perception of them.
Yeah.
To make sure no one else can influence that.
Exactly. Now let's consider someone with EID. Isolation for them often stems from a deep fear of abandonment. They might cling tightly to their partner, and not out of malice, but out of this like overwhelming need for closeness, for reassurance.
Right.
And their fear can manifest as isolating behavior, which ironically can push their partner away.
Right. It's a tragic cycle.
Exactly.
Their fear leads to behavior that triggers the very thing they fear.
Right.
Which is abandonment. Mm. And lastly, we have the DASD individuals.
Right. So 4, as you might expect.
Yeah.
For them, isolation is all about making sure that they stay in the spotlight.
Right.
They don't want to share the stage.
So we've talked about gaslighting and isolation.
Yes.
2 incredibly powerful and often damaging manipulation tactics.
Right.
And you know what strikes me is how subtle they can be.
Absolutely.
You know, it's not always about like screaming matches or physical abuse.
Right.
It can be a slow erosion of your sense of self.
Right.
Your reality, your support system.
Yeah.
That's what makes it so dangerous.
You've hit the nail on the head.
Right.
It's that subtle, almost invisible nature of these tactics that makes them so effective.
Right.
And that's why it's so crucial to be aware of them.
Right.
To recognize the patterns.
Right.
To understand the potential motivations behind them.
Okay. So we've seen how gaslighting and isolation aim to control the narrative.
Yes.
And cut off the victim from their support system.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about a tactic that brings in like a third party into the mix.
Okay.
Triangulation.
Triangulation. Classic manipulation tactic. Thrives on creating this triangle of drama and tension. You know, you might see it play out in a few ways.
Okay.
Like playing the victim to someone else to get them on your side.
Oh, yeah.
Or stirring up jealousy by, bringing up an ex or a potential rival.
Oh, I've seen that. It's like they're trying to create their own little soap opera.
Exactly.
With you caught in the middle.
And the motivations behind it can be quite fascinating.
Right.
So someone with ID, for example, might use triangulation to create chaos and maintain control over multiple people at once.
Oh,
keeping everyone off balance.
Divide and conquer.
Exactly.
On a whole new level. But what about someone with ESFD?
So for someone with ESFD, triangulation is often about bolstering their ego.
Okay.
Trying to prove that they're more desirable, more important than someone else.
Nice.
You know, they use that third party like as a prop to reinforce their image.
So it's less about causing chaos and more about
it's self-aggrandizement.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Now with the ID, things get a bit more emotionally charged.
Okay.
So triangulation for them might stem from like a fear of embarrassment or a desperate need to prove their worth. They might try to like make their partner jealous.
Okay.
Or elicit sympathy from others to validate their feelings. So it's like they're trying to stabilize their own emotional roller coaster.
Yeah.
By pulling other people into their drama.
Right.
And lastly, we have the DASD individuals.
Right. As you might guess.
Yeah.
For them, triangulation is all about creating drama.
Yeah.
And keeping themselves at the center of the stage.
Right.
You know, they thrive on attention.
Yeah.
And a good love triangle is sure to keep all eyes on them.
So we've explored gaslighting.
Yes.
Isolation.
Yes.
And triangulation.
Yeah.
3 distinct tactics,
yet
all rooted in, in control, manipulation.
Right.
A need to shape the narrative. And you know what's really striking to me?
What's that?
How subtle these tactics can be.
Oh, yeah.
It's not always about the screaming and the yelling. It's the slow, like almost invisible erosion of your sense of self, your reality, your support system. That's what makes it so dangerous.
You've hit the nail on the head. It's that subtle, almost invisible nature of these tactics that makes them so effective.
Right.
And that's why it's so crucial to be aware of them.
Right.
To recognize the patterns, to understand the potential motivations behind them.
Okay, so we've seen how gaslighting, isolation, and triangulation They aim to control the narrative, to isolate the victim, even to bring in third parties.
Yes.
But what happens when you try to hold them accountable for their actions?
Right.
That's when you might encounter another insidious tactic.
Okay.
Victim blaming.
Victim blaming.
Victim blaming.
Powerful way for the manipulator to avoid taking responsibility.
Right.
They'll twist that narrative to make you, the victim, feel like the villain.
It's like they're holding up a warped mirror.
Yeah.
And showing you this distorted reflection of yourself.
Right.
Until you start to believe it.
And what's so fascinating is how this tactic plays out across those different personality types.
Right.
For someone with ID, victim blaming, it's a straightforward way to avoid consequences.
Right.
They lack remorse,
Right.
and they readily point the finger at others to protect themselves. But for someone with ESFD,
right.
it's all about preserving that perfect image.
Right.
They can't bear the thought of being flawed or at fault. So they project that onto others.
It's like they're saying, I can't possibly be the one with the problem, but must be you.
All right. Now with EID, things get a little more complicated.
Okay.
Because victim blaming might occur during those intense emotional outbursts.
Right.
In those moments, they genuinely feel victimized.
Right.
And they lash out, placing blame on others without fully grasping the situation.
So it's less calculated.
Right.
It's more
reactive.
But it doesn't make it any less hurtful?
No, not at all. And finally, for someone with DASD, victim blaming becomes a performance.
Right.
They'll exaggerate situations, twist events, all to cast themselves as the wronged party.
Right.
Garnering sympathy.
It's all about playing the role of the martyr.
Yeah, the suffering hero. In their own drama.
It's incredible how these seemingly simple tactics can be driven by such complex underlying motivations.
That's why it's so important to look beyond that surface behavior.
Right.
You know, understand the deeper psychological dynamics at play.
Okay. So we've covered 4 tactics so far.
Yes.
Gaslighting. Mm-hmm. Isolation.
Yes.
Triangulation.
Mm-hmm.
And victim blaming.
Yes.
And it's a lot to digest.
It is.
We're just getting started.
Yeah.
But I want to pause here for a second.
Sure.
Let everyone listening kind of digest all of this.
Yeah.
You know, we've seen how these tactics can be used to control the narrative, isolate the victim.
Right.
Bring in third parties.
Yes.
Shift blame. But what they all have in common is that they're designed to make you question yourself.
Absolutely.
Your perceptions.
Yeah.
Your reality.
Right.
And that's what makes them so dangerous.
So if you're ever in a situation and you're feeling confused, manipulated, like you're walking on eggshells in a relationship.
Right.
That's a major red flag.
Yeah.
Trust your gut instinct.
Okay. So let's continue our deep dive.
Sure.
Into the world of manipulation tactics.
Yeah.
And up next, we have a tactic.
Okay.
That's probably familiar to many of you.
All right.
Stonewalling.
Stonewalling. The ultimate silent treatment.
Yeah.
It's more than just like needing a moment to cool down during an argument. It's a deliberate refusal to communicate or to cooperate.
Oh, I've been on the receiving end of that.
Right. It's like hitting a brick wall.
Yeah.
It can leave you feeling so frustrated.
Yeah, it's like they're saying you're not even worth talking to.
Exactly. And it can be a very effective way of exerting control.
Yeah.
Especially for someone with ID. They might use stonewalling to avoid accountability.
Right.
Or to punish you for not complying with their wishes.
So it's all about control and punishment.
Now consider someone with ESFD.
Okay.
For them, stonewalling is a way to regain control when they feel like their ego is threatened.
Right.
They shut down.
Right.
To avoid admitting any wrongdoing.
Okay.
Or showing any vulnerability. They retreat into their like fortress of perfection.
It's like they're saying, how dare you question my authority?
Exactly.
Or suggest that I might be flawed. I'm going to punish you with my silence.
Pretty much. Now with EID, stonewalling can be a defense mechanism when they feel overwhelmed by emotions.
Right.
They might shut down to avoid further conflict or to protect themselves from being hurt.
So it's less about manipulation and more about
self-preservation.
Self-preservation.
Okay.
And lastly, we have the DASD individuals.
Right. So as you might expect. For them, stonewalling can be a way to like create drama or make others chase after them for attention.
So we've talked about stonewalling as a way to like shut down communication.
Right.
But what about its close cousin? The silent treatment, is there even a difference?
There is a subtle but important difference.
Okay.
While both tactics involve silence,
right,
the silent treatment is more of a conscious and prolonged withdrawal of communication. It's a deliberate choice.
Yeah.
To withhold affection and attention.
Right.
As a form of punishment or control.
Right. So it's stonewalling.
Yeah.
But with an agenda.
Exactly.
So it's like saying, I'm not just ignoring you.
Right.
I'm actively punishing you.
Exactly.
With my silence.
Right. And you can see how the motivations behind this tactic vary.
Yeah.
Depending on the personality type.
Well,
so for someone with ID,
right,
it might be about punishing someone for not following their rules.
Okay.
Or avoiding taking responsibility for their actions.
No.
But for someone with ESFD,
right,
it's about reasserting their dominance.
Okay.
And making the other person feel inferior.
So it's like a power play.
Absolutely.
Like you've stepped out of line and now you're going to suffer the consequences.
Precisely. Now, for someone with EID,
okay,
the silent treatment might stem from intense emotional pain or fear.
Right.
They might withdraw as a way of protecting themselves from further hurt, even if it ends up hurting the other person in the process.
And lastly, we have those with DISD.
Right. So for them, it's all about regaining attention.
Right.
If they feel ignored, like they're not the center of attention, they might go silent as a way of making others notice them, cater to their needs.
It's a passive-aggressive way of saying, hey, remember me, I'm still here.
Exactly. So you see, even though both stonewalling and the silent treatment involve withdrawing communication, the motivations and the intentions behind them can vary significantly depending on the personality type. It's all about understanding those nuances of human behavior and recognizing the patterns of manipulation.
Okay. So we've explored tactics that aim to control the narrative.
Yes.
To isolate the victim.
Yes.
And to shut down communication. These are all pretty direct forms of manipulation.
Right.
But what about a tactic that's more subtle, more insidious?
Okay.
Something that can really mess with your head.
You're talking about projection.
Projection.
It's
like they're holding up a mirror.
Yeah.
But instead seeing themselves.
Right.
They see you and they don't like what they see.
It's a fascinating defense mechanism.
Yeah.
Where someone deflects blame by attributing their own negative traits or behaviors to you. Yeah. Instead of taking responsibility for their own shortcomings, they accuse you of having them.
It's incredibly frustrating because you're essentially being blamed for their issues.
Right. And it can be so effective.
Yeah.
Because it can make you question yourself.
Right.
You start to wonder if you're actually the problem.
Right. So how does this tactic play out?
Yeah.
Across different personality types?
Well, someone with ID might use projection to avoid accountability.
Right.
They'll deflect attention from their own misdeeds by blaming others.
Right. It's like saying, I didn't do anything wrong. It was all you.
Now for someone with ESFD, projection is all about protecting that perfect image.
Right.
They can't tolerate the thought of being flawed.
Right.
So they project their own insecurities onto others.
Like they're saying, I'm perfect.
Exactly.
And if you're pointing out flaws in me, it's because you're the one with the problem.
Right. Now with EID, projection often happens.
Yeah.
During those periods of like intense emotional turmoil, their feelings are so overwhelming that they might project their own fears and insecurities onto others.
Yeah.
Not out of malice, but out of this desperate need to make sense of their own internal chaos.
So their emotional state is actually distorting their perception of reality.
Exactly.
And lastly, we have the DISD individuals.
Right. So for them, projection can be a way to create drama and attract attention. They might accuse others of being dramatic or attention-seeking, deflecting their own need for validation onto those around them.
It's like they're saying, look at all the attention they're getting.
Exactly.
They must be doing that on purpose to upstage me.
Right. They project their own need for attention onto others, creating a drama.
Where they can play the victim.
Wow. It's amazing how these seemingly simple tactics
can
be driven by such complex underlying motivations.
That's why it's so important to, look beyond the surface behavior, understand those deeper psychological dynamics at play. It's not about judging or labeling people, but it's about recognizing patterns, protecting yourself.
Okay. So we've covered gaslighting.
Yes.
Isolation, triangulation, victim blaming, stonewalling, the silent treatment, projection. That's 7. We're not even halfway through.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack here.
But, what's fascinating is how these tactics can be used in combination.
Oh, yeah.
Like creating this potent cocktail of manipulation.
Absolutely.
And speaking of potent cocktails, our next tactic is one that can feel downright intimidating.
Okay.
Flying monkeys.
Ah, yes. Flying monkeys, like those winged creatures.
From The Wizard of Oz. These are individuals enlisted by the manipulator to do their dirty work.
Yeah.
They might be recruited to harass, to monitor, even to manipulate the target. On the manipulator's behalf.
It's like creating an army of mini manipulators.
Exactly. And again, the motivations behind this tactic can vary. Depending on the personality type. So someone with ID, for example, might use flying monkeys to extend their control and intimidate their target.
So it's about creating this power imbalance.
Exactly. But for someone with ESFD, flying monkeys are more about validation. They'll enlist others to back up their perspective and reinforce their belief that they're always right.
Even when they're clearly in the wrong.
Exactly. Now with EID, the use of flying monkeys can stem from their intense emotions and this tendency to see people as like all good or all bad. So during an emotional episode, they might turn people against those they perceive as having wronged them, using others as weapons in their emotional battles.
So it's less about conscious manipulation. It's more about...
Or reactive.
Reactive.
Exactly. And finally, for someone with DASD, flying monkeys are all about creating drama and attention. They might enlist others to spread rumors, gossip, even to harass their target, turning their personal drama into this public spectacle.
So we've seen how flying monkeys can be used to intimidate.
Welcome back. Are you ready for more? Because we are just getting started with this deep dive into manipulation tactics.
You know what's really striking to me? It's how many of these tactics we might encounter every day and not even realize it.
That's a great point. It's like you suddenly become aware of this whole hidden language of manipulation.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
And speaking of hidden languages, our next tactic is one that can be really deceptive, especially in the early stages of a relationship: love bombing.
Okay, love bombing. That sounds almost romantic.
Well, it can seem that way at first. Imagine being swept off your feet by someone who showers you with affection. Gifts, compliments, constant attention. It's like a whirlwind romance, a fairy tale come to life. But beneath that charming veneer lies a calculated tactic to gain control and influence.
So it's like a sugar rush of affection that's designed to make you addicted to their attention?
Exactly. And as with all of these tactics, the motivations behind love bombing can vary. Someone with ID, for example, might use it to quickly gain trust and exploit someone. They're all about instant gratification and will use any means necessary to get what they want.
So it's about lowering your defenses, making you vulnerable to their manipulation.
Precisely. But for someone with ESFD, love bombing is more about stroking their ego and securing admiration. They crave validation and will go to great lengths to create that illusion of being the perfect partner.
So it's less about genuine love and more about feeding their own need for adoration.
Now, with EID, love bombing can stem from a genuine but unstable sense of infatuation. They might truly believe they're head over heels in love in that moment, but their feelings can shift as quickly as the tides, leaving their partner confused and hurt.
So their emotional intensity kind of creates these bursts of affection.
Yes.
That could be intoxicating, but ultimately unsustainable.
Exactly. And lastly, for someone with DASD, love bombing is all about being the star of the show. They crave the spotlight and will use grand gestures and romantic pronouncements to keep all eyes on them.
So it's a lot about a genuine connection and more about creating a spectacle.
Precisely. It's interesting how all these different personality types can use the same tactic, love bombing.
Right.
But for such different reasons.
It really shows how complex manipulation is.
Yeah.
There's so many layers and motivations.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've explored love bombing as a way to gain control early in a relationship. But what happens when a relationship starts to unravel and one person tries to leave?
Oh, that's when things can get messy.
That's when you might encounter another manipulative tactic. Hoovering. Hoovering, as the name suggests, is like a vacuum cleaner trying to suck you back in to a relationship after you've tried to leave.
Okay.
It's that moment when the manipulator suddenly resurfaces, showering you with apologies, promises, please for another chance.
So they're trying to erase all their past misdeeds and convince you they've changed.
Right, but is it genuine?
Right. Is it real?
That's the million-dollar question. And again, the answer lies in understanding the motivations of the manipulator. Someone with ID might hoover simply to regain access to resources or control that they've lost.
Okay.
They're opportunistic and will use any means necessary to get what they want, even if it means pretending to have changed.
So it's less about remorse and more about regaining what they've lost.
Exactly. But for someone with ESFD, hoovering is all about preserving their ego. They can't stand the thought of being rejected or abandoned.
Right.
So they'll do whatever it takes to win back their former partner and restore their sense of superiority.
So it's like they're saying, you can't leave me, I'm too amazing for you to walk away from.
Now, with EID hoovering can be a bit more complex because it might actually stem from genuine feelings of loss and a desire for reconnection.
Okay.
They might truly miss their former partner and reach out in a desperate attempt to repair the relationship. But even then, their actions can be clouded by their intense emotions and fear of abandonment.
So it's like a mix of real emotions and manipulative tendencies.
Exactly. And finally, for someone with DISD, hoovering is all about regaining attention and drama. They thrive on the emotional roller coaster and might try to rekindle a past relationship just to stir up trouble and keep themselves entertained.
So they're basically saying, let's replay all the drama. It was so much fun the first time around.
Exactly. So you see, hoovering can be driven by a variety of factors, but it's ultimately a manipulative tactic designed to pull you back into a potentially unhealthy relationship. It's important to recognize those patterns and protect yourself from being sucked back into a situation that's not good for you.
Okay, so we've talked about love bombing as a way to gain control early in a relationship and hoovering as a way to regain control after a breakup. But what about that in-between phase of a relationship? What are some of the tactics that manipulators might use to maintain control and keep their partner off balance?
That's when you might encounter the emotional roller coaster of push-pull dynamics.
Push-pull dynamics, that sounds exhausting.
It can be, imagine someone who showers you with affection and attention 1 minute, then becomes distant and cold the next.
Oh yeah, I've seen that.
It's a constant back and forth that leaves you feeling confused, insecure, and constantly craving their approval.
So it's a way of keeping their partner on edge, never knowing where they stand.
Exactly. And as with all these tactics, the motivations behind push-pull dynamics can vary depending on the personality type. Someone with ID might use it to maintain control and keep the other person guessing.
Oh, yeah.
They enjoy having the upper hand and will use hot and cold behavior to keep their partner on a short leash.
So it's like a power play designed to keep their partner off balance and dependent on their approval.
Now, for someone with ESFD, push-pull dynamics are all about maintaining a sense of superiority and desirability. They want to feel wanted and admired, so they'll use this tactic to keep others yearning for their attention.
So it's like they're saying, you're lucky to have my attention, so don't take it for granted.
With EID, push-pull dynamics can stem from their intense, fluctuating emotions and fear of abandonment. They might crave closeness 1 minute and then push their partner away the next, driven by their own internal turmoil.
So their partner is kind of caught in the crossfire of their emotional roller coaster.
Exactly. And finally, for someone with DISD, push-pull dynamics are all about creating drama and keeping things exciting. They thrive on the emotional ups and downs and will use this tactic to keep their partner engaged and on edge.
It's like they're saying, let's keep things spicy. You never know what's going to happen next.
Exactly. So we've seen how push-pull dynamics can be used to control, maintain superiority, project emotional instability, and create drama. It's a tactic that can be incredibly draining and confusing for the person on the receiving end, leaving them feeling emotionally exhausted and unsure of where they stand. But up next, we'll be discussing a tactic that can be even more insidious because it often masquerades as something helpful.
chronic criticism.
Oh, chronic criticism. That's a tough one because it can be so subtle.
Yes, the master of disguise. It's a tactic that can chip away at your self-esteem over time, leaving you feeling inadequate and doubting your own abilities. And what's so tricky about it is that it often starts subtly disguised as constructive feedback or helpful suggestions.
So how do you distinguish genuine feedback from manipulative criticism? That's the key question. It's all about looking for patterns and paying attention to the delivery and the intent behind the words.
Okay.
Chronic criticism is relentless negative and aimed at undermining your confidence.
Okay.
It's not about helping you grow or improve. It's about making you feel small and powerless.
So how does this tactic play out with the different personality types?
Well, someone with ID might use chronic criticism to assert dominance and control over others.
Right.
They enjoy putting others down and making themselves feel superior.
It's a classic bullying tactic, using words as weapons to demean and control.
Now, for someone with ESFD, chronic criticism is often a defense mechanism to mask their own insecurities by pointing out flaws in others. They deflect attention from their own shortcomings and maintain their illusion of perfection.
So it's like they're saying, if I can make you feel bad about yourself, then I don't have to feel bad about myself?
Exactly. Now with EID, chronic criticism can be a product of their intense emotions and fear of rejection. They might lash out with criticism as a way of protecting themselves from being hurt, even if it ends up hurting the other person.
So their own emotional pain can manifest as hurtful words directed at others.
And lastly, for someone with DISD, chronic criticism is all about creating drama and attracting attention. They thrive on conflict and might use criticism as a way to stir up trouble and keep things interesting.
It's like they're saying, let's have a good fight. It's much more entertaining than just getting along.
Exactly. So we've explored chronic criticism as a way to control, mask insecurities, protect oneself from emotional pain, and create drama. It's a tactic that can be very subtle, but incredibly damaging over time. But up next, we'll be discussing a tactic that can be even more insidious because it aims to discredit you entirely, pathologizing.
Yes. Pathologizing this tactic is all about labeling someone's normal emotions or behaviors as symptoms of mental illness. It's a way to discredit them, undermine their credibility, and make their feelings seem invalid.
So it's like saying you're not upset, you're crazy. Exactly. And it can be a very effective way to control someone because it makes them question their own sanity. They start to wonder if they are actually the problem.
Right. So how does this tactic manifest with the different personality types?
Well, someone with ID might use pathologizing to avoid accountability for their actions. They might accuse their victim of being unstable or unreliable, making their own bad behavior seem justified.
So it's a way of shifting the blame, escaping the consequences.
Now, for someone with ESFD, pathologizing is all about maintaining their superior image and discrediting anyone who challenges them. They'll dismiss any criticism as simply a product of the other person's mental illness, protecting their ego from any blows.
So it's like they're saying, you're just crazy, so I don't have to take anything you say seriously.
Now, with EID, pathologizing might be less intentional and more a product of their own emotional intensity and difficulty with boundaries. They might misinterpret other people's behavior, projecting their own internal struggles onto them.
So it's like their own emotional turmoil is distorting their perception of others.
Exactly. And lastly, for someone with DISD, pathologizing can be a way to create drama and cast themselves as the sane one amidst the chaos. They might exaggerate others' behavior, making them seem unstable or unwell, all to draw attention to themselves and their supposed rationality.
It's like they're saying, look at how crazy everyone else is. I'm the only one who's normal.
Exactly. They want to be seen as the voice of reason in a world of irrationality.
So we've seen how manipulators can use pathologizing to avoid accountability, discredit others, project their own struggles, and create drama. It's a tactic that can be very damaging because it attacks your sense of self and your ability to trust your own perceptions. But up next, we'll be discussing a tactic that can be even more emotionally charged and hurtful: shaming.
Shaming is a powerful tactic that aims to control and manipulate someone by using humiliation or embarrassment. It's about attacking a person's core sense of self-worth, making them feel small, exposed, and unworthy.
I think we can all relate to the feeling of being shamed. It can be incredibly painful and leave lasting scars.
Absolutely. And as with all these tactics, the motivations behind shaming can vary depending on the personality type. Someone with ID might use shaming to assert dominance and control over others. They enjoy belittling others and making themselves feel powerful.
So it's like they're saying, you're pathetic and I'm better than you.
Now, for someone with ESFD, shaming is all about maintaining their grandiose self-image and feeling superior. They might put others down to make themselves feel better and reinforce their belief that they're above everyone else.
So it's a way of propping up their own ego at the expense of others.
Now, with EI shaming might occur during emotional outbursts. They might lash out with hurtful words in a moment of anger or frustration, often feeling ashamed of themselves afterward.
So it's less about conscious manipulation and more about their intense emotions driving them to say things they don't really mean.
Exactly. And lastly, for someone with DSD shaming can be a way to create drama and attention. They might intentionally embarrass or humiliate others to provoke a reaction and keep the spotlight on themselves.
So it's like they're saying, look at me, I'm causing all this drama, aren't I entertaining?
They thrive on the chaos and attention that shame can generate.
So we've seen how manipulators can use shaming to control, boost their ego, express emotional pain, and even create a spectacle. Mm-hmm. It's a tactic that can be incredibly damaging because it attacks your core sense of self-worth and leaves you feeling exposed and vulnerable.
Yeah.
But up next, we'll be discussing a tactic that can make you feel like you're going crazy splitting.
Splitting, the hallmark of black and white thinking. It's about seeing people or situations as all good or all bad with no shades of gray in between.
So it's like they're wearing those old-fashioned 3D glasses and everything is either red or blue.
Exactly. And it can be very confusing for the person on the receiving end because they're constantly being put on a pedestal 1 minute and then demonized the next.
So it's like they have this idealized view of you 1 minute and then they see you as the enemy the next.
Exactly. And as always, the motivations behind splitting can vary depending on the personality type. Someone with ID might use splitting to justify exploiting those they view as bad and manipulating those they see as good.
Well, this is a way of dehumanizing people to make it easier to take advantage of them.
Now, for someone with ESFD, splitting is all about maintaining their grandiose self-image. They see people as either admirers or enemies with no room for nuance. Anyone who challenges them or fails to meet their expectations is immediately categorized as bad and unworthy of their attention.
So it's like they're creating their own kingdom where you're either with them or against them.
Now, with EID, splitting is often driven by their intense emotions and their difficulty regulating them. They might idealize someone 1 minute and then demonize them the next, their perceptions shifting wildly based on their emotional state.
Wow. So it's like their partner is on this constant emotional roller coaster, never knowing what to expect.
Exactly. And lastly, for someone with DSD, splitting can be a way to create dramatic narratives and garner attention. They might paint themselves as the victim of someone's evil behavior, exaggerating the situation to elicit sympathy and support from others.
So it's like they're the star of their own personal drama, always casting themselves as the hero or the victim.
Exactly. And you can see how this black and white thinking can create a lot of conflict and confusion in relationships.
So we've seen how splitting can be used to justify exploitation, maintain a grandiose self-image project, intense emotions, and create drama. It's a tactic that can be very confusing and emotionally draining for the person on the receiving end because they never know where they stand. But up next, we'll be discussing a tactic that can be equally frustrating because it makes you feel like you're constantly chasing a moving target, moving the goalposts.
Moving the goalposts is a classic manipulation tactic that keeps you off balance. And feeling inadequate, it's like you're constantly trying to reach a target, but every time you get close, they move it just out of reach.
Oh, I hate that feeling. It's like you can never win.
Exactly. And as with all these tactics, the motivations behind moving the goalposts can vary. Depending on the personality type, someone with ID might move the goalpost to maintain control and keep others in a constant state of trying to please them. They enjoy having the upper hand and will use this tactic to make sure that others are always striving for their approval, but never quite reaching it.
So it's like a never-ending game where the rules are constantly changing.
Now, for someone with ESFD, moving the goalposts is a way to maintain their sense of superiority and keep others striving for their unattainable standards.
Yeah.
They believe they're always right and will constantly raise the bar, ensuring that no one ever measures up.
It's like they need to feel superior, so they'll keep moving the finish line to make sure no one else can ever catch up.
Now, with EID moving, the goalposts might be less intentional and more a product of their shifting emotions and perceptions. They might genuinely believe they want one thing 1 minute and then change their mind the next, without realizing the impact their inconsistency has on others.
So their partner is left feeling like they're on this wild goose chase, always trying to please someone who can't even make up their own mind.
And lastly, for someone with DSD, moving the goalposts can be a way to create ongoing drama and keep attention focused on them. They thrive on chaos and will constantly change the rules of the game to keep others off balance and reacting to their every whim.
It's like they're the director of their own reality show, constantly changing the plot to keep things interesting.
So you see, moving the goalposts can be a very effective way to manipulate and control others, leaving them feeling constantly inadequate and off balance.
So we've seen how moving the goalposts can be used to control, maintain superiority, project emotional instability, and create drama. It's a tactic that can be incredibly frustrating and discouraging for the person on the receiving end. But up next, we'll be discussing a tactic that can be even more insidious because it plays on our need for information and transparency, withholding information.
Withholding information is a classic power play that can leave you feeling confused, powerless, and off balance. It's about deliberately keeping you in the dark, preventing you from having all the facts, and limiting your ability to make informed decisions.
So it's like they're playing a game of cards, but they're holding back some of their cards so you can't see their full hand.
Exactly. And as always, the motivations behind this tactic can vary depending on the personality type. Someone with ID might withhold information to maintain control and manipulate situations to their advantage. They're all about self-preservation and will readily use deception to get what they want.
So it's like they're always thinking 10 steps ahead, trying to outmaneuver everyone else.
Now, for someone with ESFD, withholding information is all about maintaining their image of superiority and keeping others dependent on them. They believe they have all the answers and will dole out information selectively to reinforce their position of power.
So they're like the gatekeepers of knowledge, controlling the flow of information to maintain their advantage.
With EI, withholding information might stem from fear or a desire to protect themselves emotionally. They might hold back information to avoid conflict or to prevent themselves from being hurt, even if it ends up hurting the other person in the process.
So it's like they're building walls of secrecy to protect themselves from vulnerability.
And lastly, for someone with DISD, withholding information can be a way to create suspense or drama. They might tease information or hint at secrets, all to keep the focus on themselves and their supposed knowledge.
It's like they're saying, I have all the juicy gossip, but you have to be nice to me if you want to hear it.
So you see, withholding information can be used in a variety of ways, but it's ultimately about controlling the flow of information to maintain power and influence over others.
So we've explored withholding information as a way to manipulate and control. But what about a tactic that combines deception with a sudden shift in expectations?
You're talking about bait and switch, aren't you?
Bait and switch, it's like those ads that promise you one thing, but then deliver something completely different.
Exactly. It's about promising something desirable, whether it's commitment, affection, or support, and then pulling the rug out from under you once you've invested emotionally.
So it's like you're lured in with a promise, but then the promise is broken once you're already hooked.
Precisely. And as with all these tactics, the motivations behind bait and switch can vary. Someone with ID might use it to exploit others, gaining compliance through false promises. They're all about getting what they want, regardless of who they hurt in the process.
So it's like they're con artists using deception to get what they want.
Now, for someone with ESFD, bait and switch might be a way to maintain their image of being desirable and charming while avoiding the effort of actually meeting another person's needs. They want to appear like the perfect partner, but aren't willing to put in the work required for genuine intimacy.
So it's like they're all about appearances, but not about substance.
With EID, bait and switch might be less intentional and more a product of their rapidly shifting emotions and perceptions. They might genuinely believe they can fulfill a promise in the moment only to change their mind later when their feelings change.
So it's like they're unreliable and inconsistent, making it difficult to trust them.
And lastly, for someone with DISD, bait and switch can be a way to create drama and keep others engaged. They might intentionally create false expectations only to shatter them later, all to generate a reaction and keep the spotlight on themselves.
It's like they're always looking for the next big plot twist to keep people on the edge of their seats.
So you see, bait and switch can be a very effective way to manipulate and control others, creating confusion, hurt, and a sense of betrayal.
So we've seen how bait and switch can be used to exploit, maintain an image project, emotional instability, and create drama. It's a tactic that can leave you feeling betrayed, confused, and questioning your own judgment. But up next, we'll be discussing a tactic that plays on our sense of urgency and our fear of missing out, time pressure.
Time pressure is a classic manipulation tactic that rushes you into making a decision before you've had a chance to think things through properly. It's about creating a false sense of urgency, pushing you to act quickly without considering all the options or potential consequences.
So it's like they're saying you have to decide now or you'll miss out.
Exactly. And you can see how this tactic can be particularly effective when used by someone with ID. They're impulsive and impatient and want things done their way immediately, regardless of the impact it has on others.
So it's all about their need for instant gratification.
Now, for someone with ESFD, creating time pressure is a way to maintain control and prevent others from questioning their authority. They believe they're always right and don't want to waste time explaining themselves or considering other perspectives.
So it's like they're saying my way or the highway.
With EID, applying time pressure might stem from their own anxieties and need for immediate reassurance. They might feel overwhelmed by uncertainty and pressure others to make quick decisions to alleviate their own discomfort.
So it's like they're transferring their anxiety onto others.
And lastly, for someone with DISD, using time pressure can be a way to create excitement and keep others engaged. They thrive on chaos and might create artificial deadlines or urgent situations simply to keep things interesting and the spotlight on themselves.
It's like they're always racing against the clock, creating a sense of urgency, even when there's no need for it.
So you see, time pressure can be a very effective way to manipulate and control others by playing on their fear of missing out or making the wrong decision.
So we've seen how manipulators can use time pressure to control, assert authority, project anxieties, and create drama. It's a tactic that can be very effective because it plays on our fear of missing out or making the wrong decision. But it's important to remember that not all decisions require immediate action.
Absolutely. It's crucial to be able to step back, assess the situation, and make informed decisions without being pressured by artificial deadlines or manipulative tactics.
Okay, so we've explored a wide range of manipulation tactics, from love bombing and hoovering to moving the goalposts and applying time pressure. But up next, we'll be discussing a tactic that can be especially subtle and difficult to detect: negging.
Negging is the art of the backhanded compliment. It's about using subtle digs, insults, disguised as compliments, or even playful teasing to undermine someone's confidence and make them feel insecure.
So it's like they're trying to knock you down a peg or two by chipping away at your self-esteem.
Exactly. And what makes negging so insidious is that it's often disguised as flirting or banter, making it difficult to call out. But the underlying message is clear: you're not good enough.
Ouch, that's gotta hurt.
It can, and the effects can be cumulative over time.
So how does this tactic play out with the different personality types?
Well, someone with ID might use negging to maintain dominance and keep others feeling insecure. They enjoy putting others down and making themselves feel superior.
So it's like a power play, using subtle insults to assert their dominance.
Now, for someone with ESFD, negging can be a way to mask their own insecurities by pointing out flaws in others. They deflect attention from their own shortcomings and maintain their illusion of perfection.
So it's like they're projecting their own insecurities onto others.
With EID, negging might be unintentional. They might make offhand comments or jokes that are perceived as hurtful, not realizing the impact their words have on others.
So it's like they're clueless about how their words affect others.
And lastly, for someone with DSD, negging can be a way to create emotional reactions and keep attention focused on them. They enjoy provoking responses from others and might use backhanded compliments or subtle insults to get a rise out of people.
It's like they're saying, "Look at me. I can make you laugh and cry with just a few words."
They thrive on the emotional roller coaster that negging can create.
So we've seen how negging can be used to control mask insecurities, express emotional sensitivity, and even create drama. It's a tactic that can be difficult to detect because it's often disguised as playful teasing or harmless banter. But the cumulative effect of these subtle digs can be devastating to your self-esteem.
Absolutely. It's a form of emotional abuse that can erode your confidence and make you question your worth.
Okay, so we've explored negging as a way to subtly undermine someone's confidence, but what about a tactic that uses past kindness as a weapon?
You're talking about favor or debt shaming, aren't you?
Yes, favor or debt shaming. It's like that friend who constantly reminds you of all the things they've done for you, making you feel obligated to do something for them in return, even if it's something you don't want to do.
It's the art of using past kindness as leverage. They keep score in the relationship, making sure you're always in their debt.
So it's like they're giving with the expectation of receiving something in return.
Exactly. And as with all these tactics, the motivations behind favor or debt shaming can vary. Someone with ID might use it to exploit others, gaining compliance through guilt. They'll readily remind others of their past generosity, expecting something in return, even if the request is unreasonable.
It's like they're saying, "I did this for you, so now you owe me."
Now, for someone with ESFD, using favor or debt shaming is a way to maintain their superior position and keep others indebted to them. They believe they're special and deserving of special treatment, and they'll use any means necessary to ensure they get it.
So it's a way of reinforcing their sense of entitlement.
With EID, favor or debt shaming might stem from a fear of abandonment. They might try to create lasting bonds through obligation, hoping to secure loyalty through a sense of indebtedness.
So their insecurity is driving their need to control others.
And lastly, for someone with DISD, favor or debt shaming can be a way to gain attention and cast themselves as either the generous benefactor or the victim. They might boast about their generosity or complain about how others take them for granted, all to elicit sympathy and keep the focus on themselves.
So it's all about creating a narrative where they're either the hero or the martyr.
Exactly. And you can see how this tactic can be used to manipulate and control others by playing on their sense of obligation and guilt.
So we've seen how favor or debt shaming can be used to exploit, maintain superiority, avoid abandonment, and garner attention. It's a tactic that preys on our sense of obligation and our desire to be seen as good and helpful people. But it's important to remember that genuine kindness doesn't come with strings attached.
Absolutely true. Generosity is freely given, not a tool for manipulation or control.
Okay, so we've explored a wide range of manipulation tactics, from the more overt ones like love bombing and hoovering to the more subtle ones like negging in favor or debt shaming. But up next, we'll be discussing a tactic that can be particularly insidious because it allows the manipulator to control the narrative and avoid accountability, selective attention.
Selective attention is a masterclass in twisting reality. It's about deliberately focusing on certain aspects of a conversation or situation while conveniently ignoring others that don't fit their narrative.
So it's like they're cherry-picking the information that supports their viewpoint.
Exactly. And as with all these tactics, the motivations behind selective attention can vary depending on the personality type. Someone with ID might use selective attention to avoid accountability and manipulate the narrative to their advantage. They'll focus on details that make them look good while conveniently forgetting anything that makes them look bad.
It's like they're rewriting history to fit their own agenda.
Now, for someone with ESFD, selective attention is all about preserving their grandiose self-image and dismissing any criticism. They'll cherry-pick information that supports their belief that they're perfect while ignoring anything that suggests otherwise.
So it's like they're living in their own little fantasy world where they're always right and everyone else is wrong.
With EID, selective attention might be less intentional and more a product of their intense emotions coloring their perceptions. They might focus on details that confirm their feelings while overlooking anything that contradicts them.
So it's like their emotions are acting as a filter, distorting their view of reality.
And lastly, for someone with DISD, selective attention can be a way to shape narratives that keep them at the center of attention. They'll focus on details that make them seem interesting or important, ignoring anything that diminishes their role in a situation.
So it's like they're always trying to make themselves the star of the show.
Exactly. And you can see how this selective focus on information can be a very effective way to manipulate and control others.
So we've seen how selective attention can be used to avoid accountability, maintain a grandiose self-image project, emotional biases, and garner attention. It's a tactic that can be very confusing and frustrating for the person on the receiving end because they're constantly being presented with a distorted version of reality.
Absolutely. It creates a sense of distrust and makes it difficult to have open and honest communication.
Okay, so we've explored selective attention as a way to manipulate the narrative and control information. But what about a tactic that takes manipulation to a whole new level of absurdity?
You're talking about pretend ignorance, aren't you?
Yes, pretend ignorance. It's like that person who plays dumb just to get out of doing something.
It's the art of feigned incompetence. They might claim they don't understand what you're saying even when it's clear they do, or they might pretend to be confused about simple instructions just to get out of doing something they don't want to do.
So it's a way of avoiding responsibility by pretending to be clueless.
Exactly. And as with all these tactics, the motivations behind pretend ignorance can vary depending on the personality type. Someone with ID might use pretend ignorance to avoid accountability for their actions. They don't want to face consequences. So they'll simply pretend they don't know what they did wrong.
So it's a classic case of, I didn't do it, nobody saw me, you can't prove anything.
Now, for someone with ESFD, pretending ignorance is a way to maintain their image of perfection. They can't bear the thought of being wrong, so they'll deny any knowledge of a situation or claim they were misled.
It's like their ego is so fragile that they can't handle the thought of being anything less than perfect.
With EID, pretending ignorance might be a defense mechanism. When feeling overwhelmed or criticized, they might shut down and claim they don't understand what's going on to avoid further conflict or emotional pain.
So it's a way of protecting themselves by retreating into a state of confusion.
And lastly, for someone with DISD, pretend ignorance can be a way to make others focus on them and explain things to them. They might feign confusion about simple things to force others to cater to their needs and keep the attention on them.
It's like they're saying, I'm so helpless, please come and rescue me.
So you see, pretend ignorance can be a very effective way to manipulate and control others by playing on their patience and their desire to help.
So we've seen how pretend ignorance can be used to avoid responsibility, maintain a perfect image, protect oneself from emotional overload, and even garner attention. It's a tactic that can be frustrating and confusing, especially when, the person is perfectly capable of understanding.
It's a form of gaslighting, really making you question your own perceptions and sanity.
Okay, so we've explored pretend ignorance as a way to evade responsibility and control the narrative. But what about a tactic that uses vulnerability as a weapon?
You're talking about feigned helplessness, aren't you?
Yes, feigned helplessness. It's like that person who acts completely incapable of doing something just to get someone else to do it for them.
It's the art of playing the damsel in distress, even when there's no distress to be had.
So it's a way of getting others to do their bidding by acting helpless and needy.
Exactly. And as with all these tactics, the motivations behind feigned helplessness can vary depending on the personality type. Someone with ID might use it to exploit others' kindness and avoid responsibility. They're lazy and opportunistic and will take advantage of anyone willing to do their work for them.
So it's like they're saying, I'm too incompetent to do this, so you have to do it for me.
Now, for someone with ESFD, feigned helplessness might be a way to receive attention and maintain their sense of importance. They might act helpless to get others to cater to their needs, reinforcing their belief that they're special and deserving of special treatment.
So it's a way of getting others to wait on them hand and foot.
With EID, feigned helplessness might stem from a fear of failure or a deep-seated belief that they're not capable of doing things on their own. They might avoid tasks or responsibilities out of fear that they won't measure up, leading them to act helpless and rely on others for support.
So their fear is actually preventing them from reaching their full potential.
And lastly, for someone with DASD, feigned helplessness is a way to gain attention and sympathy. They might exaggerate their difficulties or act overly emotional to elicit caretaking and concern from others.
So it's like they're always playing the victim, hoping to get others to feel sorry for them.
Exactly. And you can see how this tactic can be used to manipulate and control others by playing on their empathy and their desire to help.
So we've seen how feigned helplessness can be used to exploit, gain attention, avoid fear of failure, and even elicit sympathy. It's a tactic that can be frustrating for those who are constantly being asked to pick up the slack, but it can also be enabling, preventing the person from developing the skills and confidence they need to take care of themselves.
Absolutely. It's important to find that balance between offering support and encouraging independence.
Okay, so we've explored feigned helplessness as a way to manipulate others through a display of vulnerability. But what about a tactic that uses rules and regulations to control and frustrate?
You're talking about overwhelming with procedures and red tape, aren't you?
Yes, it's like that nightmare scenario where you're trying to get something simple done, but you're caught in a web of bureaucracy.
It's a classic tactic used by those who thrive on control and bureaucracy. They create complicated processes, insist on following strict protocols, and demand excessive documentation, all to make it as difficult as possible for others to get what they need or achieve their goals.
It's like they're building a fortress of rules and regulations to keep others out.
Exactly. And as with all these tactics, the motivations behind this one can vary. Someone with ID might use it to assert their dominance and keep others in line. They want to be in charge, and they'll use any means necessary to enforce their rules.
So it's a way of creating a power imbalance where they're the ones in control.
Now, for someone with ESFD, overwhelming others with procedures might be a way to inflate their sense of importance and expertise. They might create complex systems or insist on following elaborate protocols to make themselves seem indispensable.
So it's a way of making themselves seem more important than they really are.
With EID, this tactic might stem from their anxieties about things not being done perfectly. They might insist on following strict rules or create elaborate processes to alleviate their own anxieties, even if it creates unnecessary burdens for others.
So it's like their need for order and control is driven by their own internal fears.
And lastly, for someone with DASD, overwhelming others with procedures might be a way to create a spectacle and draw attention to themselves. They might turn a simple request into a complicated ordeal, all to highlight their supposed expertise and keep the focus on them.
So it's like they're saying, look how complicated I can make things, aren't I impressive?
Exactly. So you see, this tactic can be used in a variety of ways, but it's ultimately about using bureaucracy and red tape to manipulate and control others.
So we've seen how overwhelming others with procedures can be used to control, assert expertise, manage anxieties, and even gain attention.
Yeah.
It's a tactic that can be incredibly frustrating and time-consuming, especially when you're dealing with someone who seems to enjoy making things more complicated than they need to be. But let's shift gears now and talk about a tactic that can be incredibly seductive, especially in the early stages of a relationship.
You're talking about mirroring, aren't you?
Yes, mirroring. It's like that moment when you meet someone and you feel like you found your soulmate because they seem to share all your interests, values, and even mannerisms.
It's like looking in a mirror and seeing a reflection of yourself staring back at you, and it can be very alluring, especially if you're looking for connection and validation.
But is it genuine? Is it real? Or is it just a tactic?
That's the key question, isn't it? And as always, the answer depends on the motivations of the person doing the mirroring. Someone with ID might use mirroring to quickly gain trust and exploit someone they're opportunistic and will use any means necessary to get what they want, even if it means pretending to be someone they're not.
So it's like they're creating a false persona to lure you in.
Now, for someone with ESFD, mirroring is all about receiving admiration and maintaining their image of being the perfect match for everyone. They want to be seen as desirable and charming, so they'll adapt their personality to fit whoever they're trying to impress.
It's like they're a chameleon constantly changing their colors to blend in.
With EID, mirroring might stem from a lack of a stable sense of self and a fear of rejection. They might unconsciously mimic others as a way of fitting in and avoiding criticism.
So it's like they're trying to find themselves by reflecting the qualities of others.
And lastly, for someone with DISD, mirroring is a way to gain attention and approval. They crave the spotlight and will adapt their behavior to whatever gets them the most attention, even if it means pretending to be someone they're not.
So it's all about putting on a show to get the applause.
So you see, mirroring can be a very effective way to manipulate and control others by creating a false sense of intimacy and connection.
So we've seen how mirroring can be used to exploit, gain admiration, seek validation, and even garner attention. It's a tactic that can be very deceptive because it preys on our desire for connection and our need to feel understood. But it's important to remember that true connection is built on authenticity, not imitation.
Absolutely. It's about being true to yourself, not trying to be someone you're not to please others.
Okay, so we've explored mirroring as a way to create a false sense of connection. But what about a tactic that's more direct, more about showering someone with praise and admiration?
You're talking about flattery, aren't you?
Yes, flattery. It's like that friend who always tells you how amazing you are, how smart you are, how talented you are.
Yeah.
It feels good to hear those things, but sometimes it feels a little insincere.
Flattery is a powerful tool that can be used for good or for evil. When it's genuine, it can boost someone's confidence and make them feel appreciated. But when it's used as a manipulation tactic, it's all about gaining something in return.
So how can you tell the difference between genuine flattery and manipulative flattery?
It's all about paying attention to the context. The delivery and the intent behind the words manipulative flattery is often excessive, insincere, and aimed at getting something from you.
So it's like they're buttering you up to get what they want.
Exactly. And as with all these tactics, the motivations behind flattery can vary. Someone with ID might use flattery to lower someone's defenses and exploit them. They're all about getting what they want, and they'll use charm and compliments to disarm their targets and make them more susceptible to manipulation.
So it's like they're using sweet talk to get their way.
Now, for someone with ESFD, flattery is a way to feed their ego and maintain their supply of admiration. They thrive on compliments and will use flattery to elicit praise and adoration from others.
So it's like they're saying, tell me how wonderful I am. I need to hear it.
With EID, flattery might stem from genuine but intense feelings of admiration. They might shower someone with praise and compliments in a moment of emotional intensity, truly believing their words in that moment. However, these feelings can be fleeting, leaving the other person feeling confused and hurt when their admiration fades.
So it's like their emotions are driving their expressions of admiration, but those expressions might not be grounded in reality.
And lastly, for someone with DISD, flattery is a way to gain attention and present themselves as charming and likable. They enjoy being the center of attention and will use compliments and praise to win people over and keep the focus on themselves.
So it's like they're saying, look at me, I'm so charming, everyone loves me.
Exactly. They're using flattery as a tool to manipulate and control others.
Well, we've explored a lot of territory in this deep dive into the world of manipulation tactics, from the more overt and aggressive tactics like gaslighting and love bombing, to the more subtle and insidious ones like negging and flattery. It's clear that manipulation can take many forms.
It's a complex and fascinating subject, isn't it?
It really is. And I think what's most striking to me is how these tactics can be used by people with a variety of personality types for a variety of reasons. It really highlights the complexity of human behavior.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so important to be aware of these tactics, to understand the motivations behind them, and to develop the skills to protect yourself from being manipulated.
So what are some key takeaways for our listeners? What are the most important things to remember from this deep dive?
Well, first, trust your gut instinct. If something feels off in a relationship, it probably is. Don't ignore those red flags or dismiss your own intuition.
That's so important. It's easy to get caught up in trying to rationalize someone's bad behavior. But if something feels wrong, trust your gut.
And second, remember that you always have a choice. You don't have to tolerate manipulation or abuse from anyone. You have the right to set boundaries and to walk away from unhealthy relationships.
It's empowering to remember that we have the power to choose who we allow into our lives.
Absolutely. And finally, I'd encourage you to approach this information with a sense of curiosity and compassion. Understanding these tactics can help you develop greater empathy, not only for yourself, but for others as well. Remember, often these behaviors stem from deep-seated pain, insecurity, or fear.
That's such an important point. It's easy to get caught up in the anger and hurt that manipulation can cause. But remembering the human element can help us approach these situations with greater understanding and compassion.
It's about recognizing that everyone is on their own journey, and sometimes those journeys can be filled with challenges and pain.
Well, this has been an incredibly insightful and thought-provoking deep dive. Thank you for joining us today. And thank you to our listeners for diving deep with us into this